Welcome to the Learning Mindset Podcast. This is Frank, and this is episode 3 of season number 2. As you know, in season 2, we're using a lot of AI to help both generate the research and the podcast itself. So this is no exception, and this is an interesting episode because for this episode, I decided to look and see what research had been done into using podcasting in education. So as typical, I went to AnswerThis.io and I generated a literature review. And if you want to check it out, go to AnswerThis.io, check it out yourself. It's free. If you do decide to upgrade to Pro, use Frank20, Frank20 in order to get a discount. But anyways, with AnswerThis, I was able to generate a really interesting literature review on the use of podcasting in education. And I'll put the citations in the podcast description as well. Now, with this particular research, it was interesting in that a lot of it was based upon the benefit or the accessibility features that podcasts bring in, language features, all of the benefits we would get from any type of audio product that we create for a learning experience. Now, from a student standpoint, one of the things that's mentioned in this episode is that a lot of students benefited from creating a podcast. Now, obviously, in my case, as an instructor, that effort that goes into creating a podcast, either by assigning it to my students or building it myself, is going to be pretty massive unless I'm using a tool like Notebook LM, which I am here, in order to create the podcast. So I think there's still a little bit of research to be done on the aspects of how much benefit occurs from the creation process versus the consumption. And I think in this episode they do talk a little bit, or they do. I'm already anthropomorphizing the AIs. So the idea is the AI and the conversation that's generated does speak to the idea that the consumption aspect is research-backed, it is relevant, and it is useful. How much that differs from the creation process, well, that remains to be seen. That's a subject of more research.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really diving headfirst into this stack of material you've brought us. We've got articles, research papers, notes, all circling around podcasting and education.
That's right. Yeah, it's quite a mix. We've got stuff covering, the basics. What is an educational podcast? Right through to the tricky implementation bits.
And the impact, right? What the data actually says.
Exactly. The effectiveness.
So our mission today is basically to sift through all this and pull out the core insights. Think of it like your quick guide to how audio is really changing the learning landscape.
We'll hit the highs, the lows, the potential, and the problems.
Hopefully giving you some solid takeaways from what these sources are telling us.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, so first things first. How are these sources actually defining an educational podcast? Because it sounds like it's more than just hitting record on a lecture.
Definitely more.
Yeah.
The sources are pretty clear. These aren't just random audio files about a subject. They're specifically designed for learning.
Designed? How so?
As a strategic multimedia resource.
Yeah.
Built with, actual learning outcomes in mind. The intention behind it is key.
Gotcha. So instructional design, but in audio form. And a big theme right away seems to be how this kind of challenges older ways of learning, like letting listeners pick and choose.
Totally. That customizable aspect is a major shift. It flips the control, puts the learner more in charge of what they listen to when they listen. That's different from a set textbook reading list or a fixed class time.
Right. So why are schools and educators getting into this? The materials point to some clear drivers. Accessibility, maybe? Modernizing things.
All of the above. Boosting accessibility is huge. Making delivery more, modern. And yeah, even giving institutions a bit of a competitive edge.
It's meeting learners where they are, basically.
Users increasingly on their phones, their tablets.
Right. And the sources mentioned this really took off, maybe accelerated, because of things like the pandemic.
Absolutely. That whole situation forced everyone to find more flexible, inventive ways to teach and learn. And podcasts fit neatly into that, especially with mobile learning or MEL learning.
M-learning, meaning you can listen whenever, wherever.
Pretty much on your commute, while you're doing chores, whatever. It turns downtime into potential learning time.
And it's spreading out, too. The sources mention it in nursing, kinesiology.
Yeah.
It's not just for, say, history lectures anymore.
No, it's becoming a really versatile tool across different fields. It's moving beyond just being a lecture substitute.
Okay, let's talk benefits then. The sources lay out some compelling advantages, Accessibility seems like the obvious starting point.
Yeah, it's probably the most cited benefit. Access anytime, anywhere. It just removes those traditional barriers of place and time.
Which is massive for anyone juggling studies with work or family, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
And the offline listening part, being able to download episodes, that's crucial too, especially if internet access is spotty.
And the control factor.
Yeah.
Being able to pause, rewind.
That's another big one. Learning at your own pace. You miss something, just skip back. Need to mull it over. Hit pause. That's directly linked to better understanding and remembering things, according to the research.
Unlike a live lecture, where if you zone out for a second, you might miss something crucial.
Exactly. And having it right there on your phone just makes it incredibly convenient.
So beyond just being convenient, how does it actually help learning? The sources talk about engagement.
They do. There seems to be something about the audio format itself. Maybe it feels more personal or it's good for storytelling that can really pull learners in.
And that increased engagement presumably leads to better results.
Yeah, the studies suggest a positive link to academic performance. When students are more engaged, they tend to learn better.
And it's not just one type of podcast, is it? The sources mention different formats.
Right. Things like recorded lectures, sure, but also interviews, case studies, discussions. Using that variety strategically seems key to keeping things fresh and catering to different learning preferences.
Okay, this is interesting. Student-generated podcasts. That sounds like a whole different dynamic.
It really is. It flips the model. Instead of just consuming, students are creating. That process itself,
Yeah.
it seems to empower them, gets them collaborating.
So they're teaching each other, in a way.
Yeah, and wrestling with the material more deeply to be able to explain it. That process boosts their own understanding.
And that leads nicely into skills, right? Beyond just knowing the subject matter.
Definitely. Making a podcast, even a simple one, involves teamwork, communication, planning.
Technical skills, too, I imagine.
Some, but also critical thinking. You have to analyze the information, structure your argument, present it clearly. These are really valuable, transferable skills.
And just listening helps, too, especially for language learners. Things like vocabulary, pronunciation.
Massively. Hearing authentic speech, different voices, accents, it's incredibly beneficial for language acquisition, especially improving listening comprehension itself.
Okay, so the potential looks pretty bright. But let's be realistic. It can't be all smooth sailing. What are the hurdles mentioned in these sources?
Time. That's a big one that comes up again and again.
Time for who? The educators or the students?
Both, actually. It takes educators significant time to plan, record, edit, and create good quality podcasts. It's not trivial.
Right.
And students also need to find the time to listen consistently and integrate it meaningfully into their study habits.
And resources, too, I guess. It's not just time. You need the gear, the software.
Exactly. Creating something that sounds professional can require decent microphones, editing software, maybe even technical support. That costs money and isn't always available, especially equitably.
And one source mentioned something about a lack of specific methods for certain subjects.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. While there's general enthusiasm, there might be less specific guidance on, say, how best to use podcasts to teach complex math compared to maybe literature or history. Educators need those practical frameworks.
Then there are the tech issues, the digital divide. That's always a concern with any ed tech.
Always. You absolutely have to consider whether all students have reliable access to the devices and the internet needed. Otherwise, you risk making inequality worse.
And even if they have access, tech problems can still be a barrier, right? Recording glitches, editing headaches.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for people who aren't super tech savvy, it can be really frustrating.
And just making sure the quality is good and that students even know these podcasts exist and why they should use them.
Yeah, quality assurance and awareness, those are key operational challenges. You need to ensure the content is educationally sound and then effectively communicate its value to students.
What about keeping students motivated? Just putting audio out there doesn't guarantee they'll listen or engage.
No, it doesn't. It needs careful design. How does it fit into the course? Is it clearly linked to assessments or learning goals? Some students, the sources say, struggle to see the relevance, especially for professional development, if it's not made explicit.
And catering to different learning styles. Audio is great, but not for everyone, presumably.
Exactly. You need to think about that diversity. Is audio the only option? Are transcripts available? How does it fit into a broader approach that supports all learners?
Okay, so we have this tension. Huge potential benefits, but also some very real practical obstacles. The crucial question then is, does it actually work? What does the research show about the impact?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And generally, the research leans positive. Several sources indicate a significant positive impact on academic performance.
Really? So students using podcasts tend to do better?
Studies show things like improved knowledge retention, better engagement with the course material.
Yeah. And not just in general terms. You mentioned healthcare earlier.
Right. In fields like medicine or nursing, studies link podcasts used to concrete improvements, better professional knowledge, increased confidence, even influencing clinical care.
Wow. Okay. And what about specific skills like speaking?
Yeah, there's evidence there too. One study, I think it was in Islamic cultural history, found podcast-based media significantly boosted speaking skills and engagement.
And those student-created ones we talked about.
Okay, the research backs that up. Creating podcasts enhances their understanding of the subject, helps them connect better with classmates, and improves their overall academic performance. It's not just a fun activity, it has measurable benefits.
And there was that specific model, AIR.
Auditory intellectually repetition.
Okay.
Yeah, basically showing that the act of repeated listening, facilitated by podcasts, directly strengthens listening skills. The format itself is doing pedagogical work.
Okay, impact seems positive. What about how students feel about it? Do they actually like using podcasts for learning?
Generally, yes. The sources report positive student perceptions. They tend to see them as effective, particularly in areas like primary care education, for example.
So high satisfaction levels.
High satisfaction is reported, yeah. Students seem to find them valuable.
And maybe the biggest indicator, are they using them voluntarily?
That's a key finding in some sources. Students aren't just using them because they're assigned, they're showing genuine interest and actively choosing to integrate podcasts into their own study routines. That kind of independent adoption, it speaks volumes.
It really does. Okay, let's zoom in on some specific areas where podcasts are being used effectively according to these materials. Language learning came up earlier.
Yeah, ESL English as a second language is a prime example. Podcasts seem particularly powerful here. They help develop speaking skills, build confidence.
How? Just by listening.
Listening is huge for acquisition, yeah. But also, it strengthens overall language learning outcomes by exposing learners to different voices, accents, vocabulary, specific terminology.
Like hearing native speakers more naturally than in a textbook exercise?
Exactly. It helps with pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, all those nuances. One source specifically highlighted how it improves the experience for immigrants in ESL classes.
And it's flexible too, right? Teachers can create specific content, students can maybe record practice conversations.
Both approaches are valuable. Teacher-created guides, student practice dialogues, and you can weave in cultural context too, which enriches the whole experience.
And video podcasts, adding visuals.
Yeah, that can be really effective for certain things, like explaining idioms or proverbs where visual context helps understanding.
What about learners with different needs? Accessibility came up as a benefit.
Absolutely crucial. For students with visual impairments, audio is obviously an essential format. Podcasts provide that accessible learning media, ensuring they're not left out. It's about equity.
And for different learning styles in general.
Differentiated podcasts can be great. Tailoring content, maybe offering different levels or formats, can promote self-regulation and engagement, especially if learning is asynchronous.
So it caters well to auditory learners, clearly.
Clearly. But also, just offering audio alongside text or other formats is a core principle of universal design for learning UDL.
UDL designing for everyone from the start.
Exactly. Instead of retrofitting accommodations, you build flexibility and multiple means of engagement and representation right in. Audio is a key modality for that.
Interesting uses in special education, too. Something about CCAPS.
Content acquisition podcast. Yeah, used to help preserve as special ed teachers get up to speed on specific methods, like for teaching math.
And for younger students.
Some evidence suggests podcasts can help reduce classroom anxiety and improve listening and speaking for primary school kids.
And as a backup when face-to-face isn't possible?
Definitely. That was highlighted during the pandemic. Podcast offered a viable way to maintain learning continuity.
Okay, let's unpack the teacher-created versus student-created distinction a bit more. The sources seem to give quite a bit of weight to students making their own.
They do. The benefits linked to student creation are pretty compelling. Improved academic results, a more lively classroom, better understanding, stronger peer connections.
It sounds like it's really about the process of creating.
Exactly. It empowers students, makes learning more active, less passive. It just seems to enrich the whole atmosphere.
So, if an educator wants to try this, what do the sources suggest? How do you implement student podcast assignments effectively?
Key things seem to be Flexibility allow for creativity and collaboration. Don't be too rigid. Also, provide some class time for them to learn the tools. Don't just assume they know how.
Right, the tech hurdle again.
Yeah. And encourage exploring different podcast genres, interviews, narratives, debates. It helps them think about structure and making a coherent argument.
Any concrete examples?
One mentioned using them for formative assessment and online teacher training. Another was engineering students making podcasts about global challenges, help them meet specific learning outcomes, and do some broader outreach.
Okay, shifting to teacher-created podcasts. What's the focus there?
It's more about delivering well-structured expert content. The emphasis is on high quality, relevance, making sure it directly addresses learning objectives.
So careful design is key.
Very key. Thinking about instructional design principles and providing clear guidance to students on how to use these resources effectively.
How are they typically used as replacements for lectures?
More often as a supplementary tool, according to these sources. Delivering core content, yes, like recorded lectures, but also providing extra material or maybe used in flipped classroom models.
Flipped classroom, where they listen before class.
Right. So class time can be used for discussion, problem-solving activities.
And examples here, you mentioned chemistry, nursing.
Yeah. Professionally made podcasts used in chemistry courses, integrated into nursing curricula, used to supplement kinesiology classes. It's about efficiently delivering specific information.
Makes sense. And underpinning all of this is the technology. What do the sources say about the tools needed? Is it getting easier?
It seems so. There's mention of free or low-cost, easy-to-use software and apps for creating and publishing. That lowers the barrier to entry significantly.
And phones are key.
Smartphones and tablets are central, yeah. For both creating, potentially, and definitely for listening. Even AI tools get a mention, like text-to-audio converters for accessibility or engagement.
And getting the podcasts out there. Distribution.
Usual suspects mention platforms like Spotify or YouTube for wide reach. But also integrating them into the university's learning management system, the LMS, or other content repositories, keeps it within the formal learning environment.
Social media for promotion.
Yeah, that can help boost awareness and reach.
But always with that accessibility lens, right?
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It's non-negotiable, really. Making sure everyone can access the content.
Which means things like transcripts.
Transcripts or captions are essential for students with hearing impairments. It's a baseline requirement.
And audio description. What's that?
That's narrating important visual information that might be in slides or video components for students with visual impairments, ensuring the audio track alone conveys all the necessary information.
Okay. Looking forward now, what exciting future trends or opportunities do the sources point towards?
Personalization is a big theme. The idea of tailoring podcast content more closely to individual learning styles, paces, or preferences.
Like adaptive learning, but for audio.
Sort of. Differentiated podcasts, maybe offering different paths or levels of detail. The goal is enhancing motivation and outcomes by making it more relevant to the individual.
What about integration with other technologies?
Yeah, there's speculation about AI playing a bigger role in creation or delivery. Maybe integrating with VR or AR for more immersive audio experiences, though that sounds a bit further off.
Using data analytics.
Right, using data to better understand how students are using podcasts and what impact they're having. Refining based on evidence.
And just reaching more people, expanding access.
Definitely. Podcasts are already proving useful for things like health education, for specific groups, like older adults, or creating series to introduce people to places or experts, like for environmental education.
And sharing teaching ideas globally.
Yeah, leveraging the format's reach to share innovative educational practices far and wide. It's a powerful dissemination tool.
It really feels like there's still a lot of room to grow here.
For sure. We've covered a lot of ground, though, digging through this material.
We really have. We've seen that huge potential, making learning more flexible, definitely more accessible, boosting engagement, building skills.
Well, we've also grounded it in the realities, the time commitment, the resource needs, the tech challenges, keeping students motivated. It's not automatic.
And the research seems pretty clear. When done well, it does have a positive impact on performance, and students generally seem to appreciate it.
Yeah, and we saw those specific applications, language learning, diverse learners, special ed, and the different flavors of teacher versus student-created content, plus the tech enabling it all.
So here's a final thought to chew on based on everything we've discussed. We know audio is powerful, it fits into busy lives, it reaches diverse learners, it engages. What if? What if the most impactful educational podcast isn't just about teaching chemistry or history, but about teaching you, the listener, how to learn more effectively using audio itself? Something to think about.
Thank you so much for listening to the Learning Mindset podcast. My name is Frank. You can find me over on YouTube on the channel Learning and Technology with Frank, where I look at topics on how we can learn and teach more effectively with technology. You can see my blog over at Summit Tech Academy, where I write about topics related to learning and technology. And of course, stay tuned and subscribe for more episodes here of the podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.